Well, you guys maybe know me. Some of you do anyway. Some of you are here for the first time. I've talked to some of you for the first time today, and I appreciate all the friends that we have here. I talked last time about the Constitution Convention movement, and we're going to talk about it again because it's upon us again. And, you know, it was clear back in 1866 that there was a guy by the name of Judge Gideon John Tucker said, "No man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislators are in session." And I think there's a truism in that. And I think that we are at grave risk again because we have quite a number of Utah politicians, all Republicans, who are again attempting to run Constitution Convention attempts and or amend the Constitution. I only have 20 minutes. I have to tell you that I have probably 8 presentations of an hour and a half long each with hundreds of slides in each. You're going to see 3 more slides after this one that's currently up. So you're going to have to come to my website, I think, sometime. I'm going to do a video on each of the individual ones at some point, and we'll try and connect the dots on this thing. We are in a powerfully dangerous time, probably worse than this nation has ever faced, and I include even the 1800s, the 1860s. You might remember that there was an effort to split the nation at that time. I believe we're at graver risk of losing this nation today than we have ever been in the entire society. And we are finding ourselves being co-opted at this time by many that should be our friends. And I liken it back to some of you in here are old enough to remember 1968. There was a Gun Control Act of 1968. Lyndon Johnson had been pushing on pretty hard. It did not have a prayer to pass through the legislative session that was there on U.S. Congress, House and Senate. There were 5 he-men, cowboys, at least on the big screen, that went on the late night talk show host TV programs, the Joey Bishop Show and so on. You might be surprised who they were: Charlton Heston, Gregory Peck, Tom Laughlin, Jimmy Stewart, and Kirk Douglas. Those guys went on and they became celebrity endorsements of the 1968 Gun Control Act. And they'd sit there, you know, they were he-men. They knew how to handle a gun. You'd seen them do it lots of times on their big screen. And they, you know, Joey, you know me, I love guns as much as anybody does, but, you know, it's time. It's time we had some common sense legislation on this, and you know people, and they'd look into the camera. You need to call your senator. You need to call your congressman. You need to tell them we need to pass this legislation, and that's exactly what the Americans did. And by that, it was a foisted, connived a way to do this, and today we have exactly that going with the Constitution Convention movement. It's been around for decades. We have had people like Orrin Hatch that have supported it almost from the very beginning, but largely it was a special interest group of people that were there that really, bottom line, want to get rid of the United States Constitution. Tragically, we have celebrity endorsements right now that are saying we need to do this. And tragically, Americans for the very first time are starting to, well, what do you mean we need to do this? And I hope that the 3 slides I'm going to show after this will be enough, if there's nothing else that you come out of my presentation with, to think about. Because we cannot do it. This is the most politically perverse time America has ever had. We have fewer statesmen at the head of this government that are in any leadership positions. I'll give you an example, we'll come back to this thought. I was in Missouri. I had an event, and I had a table there, and there was a leader of the Tea Party Patriots that came to my table, and he says, you know, really, he says, it's time for a convention. He says, I've put aside all my concerns about it. I think it's time. I said, what? Okay, well, I've got a pretty good heart, so I didn't keel over. And I says, why? Why? I says, who's going to be at it? He said, well, you'll be there, won't you? And I said, no. And there's a lot of reasons. First of all, I am going to use every breath that's in this body to fight it. They're not going to invite somebody to a convention to do that. Number 2, who do you think's going to get the invitation? They're not going to invite somebody that loves that Constitution It's going to be somebody that's already screwing it up, because there are prominent leaders right now. We keep putting them back in office. People say, well, there's a lot more Republican legislatures right now. Maybe we ought to pull it off right now. Really? Governor Herbert right now is trying to take away our ability to burn wood-burning stoves to keep our families warm. Do you want a governor like that at that thing? I mean, come on. And he's probably one of the better ones. I don't know that for a fact. But the fact of the matter is, and then we have, well, boy, there's so many angles I could approach this from. All 8 or 10 of my presentations take another facet of this. We can put this to bed every which way from here to Sunday. Well, Sunday's tomorrow. Let's go over until the next Sunday. There's so many ways, so many challenges, so many things that people are saying that simply are not true. For example, there's 2 reports that have come out from the Congressional Research Service. One in 2012, and one in 2014. They're about 40 pages each. People don't understand that Congress is realizing there is a movement to bring about a convention. Congress went to the Congressional Research Service, which is a nonpartisan organization that writes white papers. This is something like what I might be interested in writing. I like to write a lot. They do a fairly fair job, I might say, of reviewing all of the verbiage that's out there. They look at academics, they look at pundits on the news, they look at people that have got an agenda. They look at Mark Levin, they look at the Goldwater Institute and all those kinds of people, okay? And they've compiled it together and said, this thought's out there, that's thought out there, this is what we think, this is what, and then they go back and say, based upon what the Constitution says, we think this is probably the approach the Congress will take. Now see, all of these, I use the term, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. All of these people that want a convention and they think that the states can call it, the states can gather, the states can craft it, the states will control the agenda, and the states will foster it and say, now Congress, you make everybody come and ratify this. Oh, by the way, we had enough states there that are ratifying. And why do we think that? Because the Republicans hold most of the legislative bodies. People, they're going to be Democrats there too. Okay? This is a fact of life. And we're not going to get this Pollyannish viewpoint. Everything could be at stake. Okay, so they say, oh, well, it'll be one state, one vote. Really? Well, that's because the first convention that was held in 1787 was one state, one vote. But this is a democracy-prone people. And if one state got one vote, let's say Wyoming, less than 600,000 people. Let's say California, more than 38 million people. If it was one state, one vote, it'd be each Wyoming person would have 63 times more influence than each California citizen. Do you think Feinstein and Boxer and Jerry Brown and those guys are going to put up with that? Not for a heartbeat. And these Congressional Research Service reports recognize that. They say, this is nonsense. We are not going to do that. And they suggest that possibly the Electoral College is an established way of doing things. And so that'd be 535 votes. How many does California have? 55. How many does Wyoming get? 3. How many does Utah get? 6. How many does New York get? 29. I mean, you could go through, wait. Didn't the Electoral College vote for and put into office Obama the last couple of elections? See, you don't, this is totally a Pollyannish view of how these things might be done. Oh, good grief, where's my timer? You're there? Hey, shh, go back to sleep. Last time I spoke, I was kind of mobbed afterwards, and I got a lot of conversations with people. I was against the Constitution Convention even then, and some people were carrying this book, Mark Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments. I don't want to have a show of hands how many got this, but this book, if the program that was outlined in this book, now Mark Levin has been made a god by many people apparently, at least a conservative icon. I don't know how many times he's endorsed Orrin Hatch. I don't know what that means. But the fact of the matter is, if these amendments proposed by Mark Levin, and the presentation I was going to do today came out to hundreds of slides, and so I'm not doing it. I was going to take each amendment line by line, concept by concept, and show you on plain slides in front of you that if this were implemented, he would make constitutional that which is currently unconstitutional. And it would be more damaging, and this is a pretty bold statement, and you're going to find this, well, should I really believe that or not? I would say it would be more damaging than anything and everything taken on whole sum and substance that Obama has done his entire time in office, more damaging to this nation. And then as I thought about that, I thought, well, no, that's not quite true. It would be more damaging than anything and everything that has damaged the Constitution in the last 100 years. Why? Because we still have the Constitution. We can still undo this. And when Mark Levin is proposing things that will make unconstitutional elements of the executive branch, like the Department of Ed, constitutional if a supercommittee of Congress agrees, and if you can take a Supreme Court decision and have it overridden by this Congress or by the states, you're changing the fundamental basis of this nation. There are things that are supposed to be only the national government's prerogative. And the Founding Fathers had been there, done that. They'd seen that the Articles of Confederation had problems. And so what they did is they went and realigned these establishment things, that some things went to the national government, some things were retained by the states and the people. And you can read about that in the 10th Amendment if you want. But the fact of the matter is, let's take Federalist Papal 45. James Madison said, here's where the national government look. It's in one little paragraph, really. And basically, they have the external things, the national government. The states have the internal things and all the things that really we ought to be able to handle ourselves. And the fact of the matter is, in Levin's book, he starts talking about overriding things that might happen in the Supreme Court. Let's just say the Supreme Court decided that the right to keep and bear arms was an individual God-given right. By the way, they said that in Heller and in the McDonald case in 2008 and 2010. They really said some other bad things in those decisions too that really will be the basis of the destruction of the Second Amendment if people really start carrying them out. They're very damaging, although we've only heard the superficial things. But one of the things they did say that was right, it's an individual thing. They didn't say it was God-given, they just said it was individual. Okay, well, let's say the Supreme Court said the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right. 3/5 of Congress, that's 261 congressmen and 60 senators, could say, no, that's not the way. It's not. It's not an individual right. And let's say they said, okay, you can't kill babies anymore, whether they're born or unborn. Let's say that marriage was a thing designed by God and government has no say in it. Whatever the Supreme Court says, 3/5 of Congress can override it. And there's no appeal from that. So here's what it does, in essence, people. It allows 3/5 of Congress to amend the Constitution with no further questions asked. No recourse, no way to go back on it. And you look at, and if that isn't bad enough, 3/5 of the states, that's 30 states could override the Supreme Court. And in essence, what it comes down to, there's no further recourse. It is the Constitution has been changed permanently, unequivocally, and there's no further discussion. You look at the balanced budget amendments, they're taxing amendments. You look at the voting things. We're going to run out of time before we run out of issues. But virtually everyone, not every one of them, he does suggest getting rid of the 17th Amendment, but I would say without a con, we can get rid of that the same way we got rid of the 18th Amendment with the 21st Amendment, the regular standard amending process. You know, where 2/3 of both houses bring it forward, 3/4 of all states do it. But he does other things, like put in term limits, for crying out loud. The first Constitution, Articles of Confederation, had term limits. They didn't like them. They left them out. They did it for a reason. They hadn't had a good experience with them. Think about this. If his term limits went into effect, 12 years in the House or the Senate, okay, we have a session in a part of Congress now that they call a lame duck session. Okay, from November to January. Are we worried during that time? Yes, we are, because everybody says, hey, I got no more constraints. Ooh, man, my constituents can't do anything about it. I'm already out of office, and so they run willy-nilly over everything. How would you like a senator that spent 6 years in office and got reelected because they'd been towing the line for another 6-year term? We got a 6-year lame duck. Oh, doggies. Look what happened when Bob Bennett got ousted in the spring. And he was in until January. He got ousted in the convention, didn't he? And you saw his true colors come out. We can give you example after example. Luke chapter 16, verses 1 through 7 talks about this. They don't call it a lame duck session. They call it the unfaithful steward. And in that, a steward is found to be taking advantage of his office. He's fired. There's a period of time in there before he gets left, and he further does injustice to his master. That's what lame ducks do. We could take every one of these. I wish there were time to give you an hour-and-a-half presentation, but unless our timekeeper goes to sleep, we won't have to be able to do that. So I think we really are about out of time. But I just want to show you this one slide. Well, there's actually 3. And by the way, there's how to get in touch with me if you want to. The first 2 websites, my webmaster is on a cruise or something, and it's in maintenance, and it's not working too good. But there's a phone number you can try and get in touch with me with. Anyway, okay, question. Who will be a modern CONCON delegate? I've got 15 faces up there and a little smiley face guy. I could do 50 of these, folks. I didn't have room for the Bill and Hillary Clintons, and I didn't have room for the John Kerrys. I didn't have room for the Jerry Browns or the Gary Herberts. I didn't have room for hundreds of people. But who will be there? Be honest with yourself. Stop kidding yourself. Wish there were time to show you why constitutionally some of these approaches not only are at risk, but they will not happen one state, one vote. Do you see any of these being a modern CONCON development or delegate? Do you see any of them? No, they will not be there. We will have, some of you may have seen Casablanca in recent decades. Remember the scene at the end where the Nazis been killed and they want to figure out how they're going to maybe get to the bottom of this without getting to the bottom of it? And the instructions given to round up the usual suspects? We're going to round up the usual suspects. That will be, not these guys, somebody from that pool that's out there, and the 50 slides I could have made from that. And there will be probably at least 535 of them there. And Utah will probably be very underrepresented. And it's interesting to me that you go back to the Congressional Research Service people. These are the people that are counseling the congressman. These are the people that say the states cannot call a convention. They go to Congress when they have applied, and then Congress calls it. Congress has all the rules of engagement, the agendas, the length of time, the payment, who can be there. They call in the delegates, the number of delegates, and everything else. Congress will do that. Do you see any congressmen on this picture? Do you see anybody here that you would trust with your Constitution? And even if you saw one, are there going to be 535 there? Absolutely not. Please join with me in stopping this effort. And again, we could name some of our congressmen and senators that are in our state legislature. They're going to be there pushing that this year. We've got to be there. We've got to stop it, please. And thank you for letting me be here again. Appreciate it, Gail.